In the rugged and untamed landscapes of South Africa, where the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and the wind whispered secrets of the wild, a pack of wild dogs, also known as African wild dogs, prepared for their daily hunt. The pack, led by an experienced alpha male named Zuko, was a tightly knit family. Their bond was forged in the heat of battle and tempered by years of survival in the harsh savanna. The pack's success wasn't just a result of their individual skills, but of their incredible teamwork. Each member knew their role, and they trusted one another as if their lives depended on it, which, of course, they did. It was early morning when they set out, their ears perked and tails twitching with excitement. They had been without food for days, and their hunger gnawed at their bellies. The pack's sharp senses, honed through countless hunts, detected movement ahead. A herd of impala grazed lazily in the distance, unaware of the predators closing in. Zuko, tall and strong, was the first to notice the wind shifting. He signaled the pack to spread out, every dog knowing their place in the chase. He glanced at his beta, Kazi, a lithe and agile dog with a quick mind, and nodded. Kazi darted into the tall grasses, leading the pack toward the herd with a swift, silent grace. Among the pack was a younger dog named Tana, whose speckled fur blended perfectly with the terrain. She was smaller than the others, but what she lacked in size, she made up for in speed and cunning. Her energy was boundless, and her eyes sparkled with the thrill of the hunt. But she wasn't just an enthusiastic chaser. Tana had learned quickly that the strength of the pack lay not in individual glory, but in working together. The dogs spread out, encircling the herd, moving like shadows through the grass. They were ghosts in the morning light, silent and swift. As the dogs began to close in on their prey, Zuko's sharp eyes fixed on the leader of the impala herd, a strong and sturdy male, his horns curved back with a menacing elegance. Zuko knew that the fastest way to bring the herd into disarray was to target the leader. With a series of quick signals, the pack sprang into action. They burst from the grasses with coordinated precision, the chase beginning in an explosion of energy. The impala scattered in every direction, but Zuko and Kazi were fast, their eyes locked on the leader. The pack followed with precision, their movements synchronized like the gears of a well-oiled machine. But something unexpected happened during the chase. As the pack closed in on their target, a sharp cry echoed through the air. It was Tana. She had been too focused on the chase, her small frame darting in between the hooves of the impala. In the chaos of the hunt, one of the panicked antelopes had made a desperate move, and in its frantic escape, it struck Tana with the force of a thunderclap. The impact sent Tana tumbling to the ground, her body colliding with the hard earth. For a moment, she lay still, dazed and vulnerable in the thick dust cloud that rose from the running herd. Her breath came in shallow gasps as the pain in her side flared. She had been hurt, badly. The rest of the pack froze. Zuko's heart clenched in his chest as he spotted Tana on the ground, the other impala fleeing in the distance. For a moment, it seemed as though time stood still. The alpha's instincts screamed for him to go after the impala. The pack's survival depended on food, after all, but the sight of Tana, struggling to rise, demanded immediate attention. Kazi was the first to reach her, his sleek body weaving through the tall grasses like a shadow. He nudged her gently with his snout, trying to rouse her. The younger dog's eyes fluttered open, and her body trembled with the effort of breathing through the pain. The pack's hunting instinct had been replaced by an urgent, protective need. They knew that no hunt was worth losing one of their own. Zuko was already moving toward her, his eyes scanning for any sign of danger. He barked a command to the pack, signaling them to regroup. The impala had escaped, but Tana was the pack's priority now. As Zuko reached Tana, he lowered his head, his dark eyes full of concern. The other members of the pack began to gather around, forming a protective circle around the injured dog. Tana's injuries were severe, her side was bruised, and it seemed as though she had broken a rib in the collision. She could barely lift her head, and her usual bright eyes were clouded with pain. But the pack wasn't about to leave her behind. Zuko, his mind racing, made a decision. The hunt would have to wait. The pack needed to get Tana to safety, back to the den, where they could tend to her injuries and ensure she would heal. He barked again, signaling the others to help. One by one, the pack members moved in close, and with gentle nudges and soft whimpers, they helped Tana to her feet. It was clear that she could barely walk, her body trembling with every step, but the bond between the pack members was undeniable. They supported her, lifting her when she faltered, guiding her through the grasses with steady, comforting pressure. But the journey back to the den would not be an easy one. The savannah was vast and unforgiving, and with predators lurking at every corner, every moment was a risk. But Zuko was determined. He knew that no matter the danger, the pack was strong, and they would care for one of their own, just as they always had. As they made their way through the thick underbrush, Tana's breathing became steadier, and though her body was still weak, there was a glimmer of determination in her eyes. She knew that her pack would not abandon her. And with that, the journey home began, but what would await them on the way? Would they make it back safely, or would the unforgiving savannah claim another life? The wild dogs had faced many challenges before, but this journey was unlike any they had undertaken. The true test of their loyalty, strength, and courage was only just beginning. The journey back to the den was long, and every step Tana took was a struggle. With each passing moment, her pain seemed to intensify, but the support of her pack made it bearable. Zuko, ever watchful, kept a close eye on her, his powerful frame always just a few steps ahead. He occasionally turned back to ensure the rest of the pack was close, his sharp gaze scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. Kazi, the pack's beta, remained at Tana's side. He was small but swift, with a protective streak that ran deep. Kazi nudged her forward gently with his snout, giving her the strength to keep moving. Even though he was concerned for her, he didn't let the pack slow down. He knew that time was of the essence. They couldn't afford to linger too long in the open savannah. Danger was always lurking. The wild dogs were masters of endurance, and their stamina had carried them across the harshest terrain before. But today, the savannah felt different. The usual rhythm of the hunt, the exhilaration of the chase, was replaced by a tense silence as the pack focused solely on getting Tana to safety. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the grasslands. The heat was oppressive, and the air shimmered with the weight of it. But the pack had a singular purpose: to get Tana to the den, where she could rest and heal. Their eyes were constantly scanning the surroundings for predators. The savannah, beautiful and deadly, was a place where a single misstep could mean the difference between life and death. But it wasn't just the threat of lions or hyenas that worried Zuko. It was the possibility that the pack's unity would be tested in ways they had never imagined. They had never been forced to leave a hunt unfinished. They had never needed to protect one of their own this way before. Tana's body, once full of youthful energy, was now weak and fragile. Her breath came in shallow gasps as the pain from her injury intensified. Her limbs shook with every movement, and despite the gentle encouragement from her pack, it was becoming increasingly clear that she could not keep up. "Slow down," whispered Kazi, his voice low and soothing. He nudged Tana's flank once more, but the pain was evident on her face. "We'll take it slow. You don't have to rush. We'll get there." Tana managed a weak nod, her eyes reflecting gratitude but also frustration. She was a fierce and proud young dog, and this injury, this moment of weakness, gnawed at her. It wasn't just the physical pain that was wearing on her, but the humiliation of being the one to fall behind. The wild dogs never left anyone behind. The pack was everything. Zuko, sensing her inner turmoil, turned back and walked alongside her. He was the alpha, the leader, the one who made decisions for the pack, but in this moment, he was simply a protector. His steady presence offered her reassurance. "We move together," Zuko said, his voice firm but compassionate. "No one gets left behind. Not today, not ever." Tana met his gaze, and for the first time since the hunt had gone wrong, a flicker of hope ignited in her chest. Zuko's words, the truth of them, helped to steady her. She wasn't alone in this. The pack kept moving forward, and despite her injury, Tana began to find a rhythm. The other members stayed close, forming a protective barrier around her. At the rear, the youngest member, a pup named Leela, looked up at the adults with wide eyes, curious and worried. Leela wasn't yet old enough to participate in the hunts, but she had already learned the importance of the pack's unity. She glanced at Tana, her small frame trembling with the weight of the situation. Zuko, aware of the pup's concern, gave a reassuring glance. "She'll be fine," he said, though even his tone couldn't fully mask the worry he felt. The sun was high in the sky now, and the journey was beginning to take its toll on the pack. They had covered miles of terrain, and though they had been careful to stay in areas of tall grass where they could remain hidden, Zuko knew they were close to the den. It was only a few more miles, but those few miles could mean everything. It was then that the first sign of danger appeared. From the thick brush to the left of the pack, a low growl broke the silence. The pack froze. Zuko immediately raised his head, his ears pinned back, every muscle in his body tensing in anticipation. Kazi's eyes flicked toward the sound, and a deep snarl escaped his throat. A lone hyena emerged from the underbrush, its eyes glinting with hunger. It was lean, its coat patchy and rough from months of scavenging. The hyena's presence was a danger, not just because of its own predatory instincts, but because hyenas were notorious for harassing wild dogs. They were opportunists, waiting for weakness, and right now, the pack was vulnerable. The hyena circled, its lip curling in a menacing grin. It seemed to recognize that the pack was not in the mood for a confrontation, not while Tana was injured. It was testing them, trying to provoke a response. Zuko's eyes burned with fury, but he held his ground. Hyenas could be dealt with, but not at the expense of Tana's safety. The pack needed to keep moving, and Zuko wasn't about to let this scavenger jeopardize everything they had worked for. The hyena, sensing that the pack was not intimidated, let out another low growl. It took a step forward, and then another, before stopping just a few paces away from Tana. The injured dog whimpered, instinctively trying to back away, but the pain in her side stopped her from moving fast. Without warning, Zuko lunged forward. He was a blur of motion, his teeth bared in a warning snarl. The hyena, startled by the sudden movement, took a step back. But it wasn't enough. Zuko moved in with terrifying speed, pushing the hyena back, his teeth grazing the creature's side as it retreated into the shadows. With a final, frustrated growl, the hyena disappeared into the tall grass, unwilling to challenge the strength of the pack any longer. Zuko stood tall, his chest heaving with the effort. The pack had gathered around him now, and the moment of danger had passed. They were safe, for now. Tana, still struggling to remain upright, looked up at Zuko. Her eyes were filled with gratitude, and though she was too tired to say anything, her gaze spoke volumes. She knew that without Zuko's leadership and the pack's protection, she wouldn't have made it this far. The journey wasn't over, but it felt like a victory. The pack had faced the danger together, and they had emerged unscathed. But ahead, there were still many miles to cover, and the dangers of the savannah were never far away. Would the pack make it home safely? And how much longer could Tana continue? The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The bond between the wild dogs was unbreakable, and they would protect each other to the very end. The den was close now, but every step seemed to stretch the distance between Tana and the safety she so desperately needed. The heat of the sun was relentless, and the pain in Tana's side was unbearable. Each breath felt like a battle, and her body was becoming weaker with every step. Yet, despite the agony, she was determined not to slow the pack down. She stumbled but regained her footing with the help of Kazi, who gently nudged her forward, a constant presence by her side. Zuko kept a close watch on the pack's rear, his eyes constantly scanning the savannah, ever vigilant for threats. The tension that had been building over the past few hours seemed to weigh heavier now. They had escaped the hyena, but there was no telling what else the savannah might throw at them. The dangers of the wild were never predictable, and each day was a new challenge. But Zuko's instincts told him they were close. Very close. Tana's mind, clouded with pain, kept drifting in and out of awareness. Every time she blinked, the world around her seemed to shimmer and shift. At times, the thought of just lying down, of resting her weary body on the cool earth, seemed like the only thing she wanted. But that would mean abandoning her pack, something she couldn't bring herself to do. The thought of being left behind, of failing her family, was unbearable. "We're almost there," Zuko's voice reached her ears, calm and steady. His words anchored her in the moment, grounding her in the reality of the pack's journey. The den was within sight, nestled in the shadow of a large rock formation, surrounded by a thicket of shrubs that provided both shelter and protection. It was the heart of their territory, the place they called home, where they could rest, heal, and regroup. But as the pack drew closer, a sudden movement caught Zuko's eye. A rustle in the bushes, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing. "Stay close," Zuko hissed, his body tensing as he slowed his pace, preparing for another potential threat. The pack instinctively huddled closer, their senses on high alert. Kazi positioned himself between Tana and the potential danger, while the rest of the pack formed a loose circle, ready to defend. Out of the underbrush emerged another creature, this time, not a predator, but a fellow wild dog. It was a member of a neighboring pack, their fur worn and ragged from the harsh conditions of the dry season. The stranger, a young dog named Taji, looked exhausted and hungry, his eyes darting nervously between Zuko and the rest of the pack. Zuko's gaze softened, and for a moment, the tension in his muscles eased. Taji was a familiar face, a lone wanderer who had once been part of a pack that had succumbed to the dangers of the wild. He had been living on the fringes ever since, surviving by his wits and his strength, but never staying in one place for long. "What are you doing here?" Zuko's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. The pack had their own struggles to deal with, and they couldn't afford to take in every lone wanderer that crossed their path. I need help," Taji replied, his voice raspy and weak. His sides were heaving, and his once bright eyes now looked dull and worn. "My pack, it's gone. The lions attacked. I couldn't save them. I've been following your scent. I just need to rest, and maybe food. Please." Zuko's eyes narrowed, assessing the situation. He could see the desperation in Taji's posture, the exhaustion in his frame. But he also knew that to let another dog into the pack was a decision that came with risks. Wild dogs were not easily accepted into new packs, especially in the midst of such a challenging time. Before Zuko could speak, Tana's weak voice reached him. "Let him stay," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but there was a strength in it that Zuko could not ignore. "We've all been through so much. If we don't help him, who will?" Zuko's gaze shifted to Tana. Her words were like a spark, igniting something deep within him. The pack was built on unity, on strength, on loyalty. If they couldn't show compassion to those who needed it, what kind of pack would they be? Despite the risk, despite the uncertainty, Zuko knew the answer. With a deep sigh, Zuko nodded. "All right," he said, his voice low but resolute. "You can stay, for now. But you must prove yourself, Taji. We don't trust easily, and we don't give our loyalty lightly. If you want to survive with us, you'll have to earn it." Taji nodded, relief flooding his face. "I understand. I will." With the newcomer's presence settled, the pack began to move again. They were close now, so close. The den was within reach, the familiar scent of the earth and shelter filling their noses as they approached their safe haven. But just as they were about to enter the thicket, another sound rang out across the savannah. A rustling noise, low growls, a voice, familiar yet menacing, filled the air. Zuko froze, his ears standing at attention. "No," he whispered under his breath, a growl of frustration building in his throat. The unmistakable sound of a lioness's roar shattered the tension, and in that instant, Zuko knew that their home, their sanctuary, was no longer safe. The pack turned to face the source of the sound, their hearts racing. The lioness was not alone. Behind her, the massive forms of two other lions moved silently, their eyes locked on the pack's vulnerable position. Zuko's heart pounded in his chest. The den, the place of safety they had fought so hard to reach, was now a battleground. "We fight together," Zuko growled, his voice strong and filled with authority. "No matter what, we do this as a pack. Stay close. Keep your eyes open." Kazi, Taji, and the others moved into formation. Tana, though still injured, stood with the pack, her body trembling, but her spirit unbroken. The fight ahead would not be easy. The lions were far more powerful, and they outnumbered the dogs. But the pack had something the lions did not: unity. The first lioness lunged toward the group, her teeth bared, her eyes glowing with hunger. But the pack, despite their exhaustion and Tana's injury, moved as one. Zuko led the charge, his speed and strength making him a formidable force. Kazi darted in and out, nipping at the lioness's heels, distracting her long enough for the others to circle around. With a final, coordinated effort, the pack forced the lions to retreat, not through brute strength, but through the sheer force of their unity. The lions, frustrated by the dogs' relentless defense, finally turned and fled into the brush, their pride wounded more than their bodies. Exhausted but victorious, the pack stood together, panting heavily, their tails raised high. They had defended their home, and they had done so as a family. Tana, though still weak, felt a surge of pride that washed over her like a wave. She had been a part of this victory, this triumph of loyalty and courage. Zuko turned to face the pack, his eyes filled with pride and relief. "We've done it," he said, his voice filled with quiet satisfaction. Together. The pack's journey had been long and arduous, and many had doubted they could make it this far. But in the end, it was their bond that had carried them through, a bond forged in the fire of survival and tempered by the unbreakable strength of the wild. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the savannah in a soft, golden light, the pack finally settled into the safety of their den. The day's struggles were behind them, and for now, they could rest together. And though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear: no matter what lay ahead, they would face it as a family, a pack that would never break, no matter how wild the world became.